Welcome everyone to this session on how to align screen sharing software with learning goals. I think when we think of screen sharing software, certainly in my mind's eye, I picture a student sharing to the front or a teacher walking around the room and sharing to a display or an interactive screen. But there are a lot of really important things that happen in between that or prior to that and post that. You know, how does that actually align with what the teaching goals are? How does it align with the teachers and students' routine? What are the expectations around when to share and why to share, why you should share? And the person that solves a lot of these issues and problems and makes sure that it's a great experience for teachers and students is Britney, who has been very kind to join us today. I'll let her introduce herself in a second. She's a digital coach, and her job is, I guess, Britney is working alongside your, the teaching staff and pupils to make sure that you're not just saying, "Here's the technology, I've done my bit, figure out how to do it," because that's a recipe for disaster, not just in screen sharing, but in any walk of life. So this screen sharing session, this webinar is really about the facilitation and how to align the most important thing of learning outcomes and learning goals with the tools that are in use. And I will been very lucky to have a sneak peek at the presentation. I think everyone will be really excited, and it's really great. So lucky we'll be able to send you that after the session. And I'm going to now pass over the mic to you, Britney. I think you've got some interactive elements. I guess to anyone that's watching or listening or viewing, feel free to raise your hand at any point if you've got any questions and want us to go back on. So without further ado, I'll pass it to you, Britney. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Ed gave me a pretty good introduction there to know what I do. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it as we go. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now, just so you guys can all see my presentation here as I talk through it. And please pause me at any moment if you have questions. I definitely like presentations where they're interactive. So we're here today for screen sharing for instructional technology coaches. And how to align screen sharing technology with learning goals in the classroom. That is the goal today, but definitely, I know everybody's in different roles, and that's something we'll touch on if you're joining. So I geared this to hopefully be adaptable for if you're not just an instructional coach, but it can still be useful for a classroom that you work with or a school that you're at. Like Ed said, I will be doing some interactive slides. So if you would like to join, here's a QR code for the Slido. If you want to do it on your phone, that's the best way, as a QR code. If you want to do it on your desktop or laptop, just type in slido.com, and that 163345 is the code for this session. So I'm going to give everybody just a minute to do that if that's something you wish to participate in. I understand too, some of you guys are, especially if you're in education, you're multitasking 400 things at one time. So I get it if you're not able to also interact as well. Cool. And this code right here will be in the corner too. Just let me know, we can pop it back up as we go through. So you guys, I see some of them are already in here, but the first one that should have popped up with your Slido is, what is your role? Just so I can kind of see, and we can all see what we have here in this presentation and who's here, and just kind of see which direction we're taking this to. So I see instructional coaches, teachers, cool, other administration, a couple admin. Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for letting me know. That's super helpful as we walk through this, just kind of where to direct some questions and content. Awesome. So our learning outcomes today are these 3 points. So how to align screen sharing technology with the learning goals of the classroom, how to implement screen sharing technology in the classroom. So just some good steps to try to get started with it. And then which teaching goals screen sharing best fits. So what are some strategies that I've seen that I've worked with teachers with that I've seen work really well. And I'm sure you guys joining may have seen some others as well. So if you have any, I'll give you guys a chance to kind of throw them in there, because definitely collaborating is the best way to kind of get through there. I did miss one of my slides here about, so I'm going to we'll stop right here before I pop into it. One of my big goals, like Ed touched on, is technology integration. So a lot of schools or teachers, or sometimes you just get technology and you're like, here, go. And so the impact that technology can make is not always where it needs to be. So that's where my role comes in. I work for Denver Public Schools here in Denver, Colorado in the US. And I have, I work directly with 13 elementary schools. So with the admin staff talking about what type of plan they want to do with their school, as well as with individual teachers or teams of how they can best see technology integrate in what they're doing. Because it shouldn't be that separate thing, because I feel like that's when it gets pushed aside, is technology should be part of everything that you're doing. It's just finding that way of where to put it in there. And that's kind of where my role sits. I taught for 10 years before this role that I'm in now. So it's super helpful when I go into classrooms, just to kind of have that point of like understanding the stresses of getting technology in, but seeing how much difference it can make when it's part of it. So sorry, I skipped a slide accidentally, but so let me pop back in here to the first part that we're going to go through today. So how to align screen sharing technology with the learning goals of the classroom. I kind of put this in 3 different steps. So first, just identifying and starting with what teachers or schools are already doing, like I was kind of saying. So identifying what is the academic standards that you're working on, or what is the curriculum the teacher's working with. So starting there. And then the next point is moving towards where does a student voice fit in? Where can we make this switch so that it's not as much teacher talk and it's more of students leading the learning and feeling empowered in the work that they're doing. Once that area is identified, then shifting. So then actually making an actual step in the lesson plans, or on the learning goals of the lesson, or the technology that you're putting in there, to then really empower the students so they have the voice, and the teacher is the facilitator with the instruction. So that's kind of how I go into my coaching conversations. I threw this slide in here too, because this helps me in my coaching conversations of like where to start. A lot of times I have more, but I just kind of pick these out. So I ask teachers, or if you're a teacher, ask yourself, what do you want students to be able to do or show? And what do you want to see happen in your classroom? So once they are doing and showing it, you walk in and they have it. It's not like, oh, I have to teach them this whole routine. I have to teach them how to do that. Like, they're naturally doing it because you have taught them this. And then how will technology support the lesson or unit objective? And the last one is, how are you empowering students with culture responsive teaching practices? And that's really big in my district. I know a lot of different education sectors, but just to expand a little bit more. So some examples of culturally responsive teaching practice is kind of what we're going to talk about today, but like empowering student voice, shifting the narrative of having usually the teacher as the center of the instruction, allowing students to bring more of their identities into the classroom and co-creating that classroom together, making that community so that students are part of it, and it is theirs. They have that ownership of it as well. There's a lot more to it, but those are just pieces of it that really, I think, can tie into specifically what we're talking about today. So an example of this, that kind of process I was talking about, is in the US, a lot of states use Common Core standards, Colorado being one of them. Part of the Common Core standards is Common Core standards for mathematical practice. So these are things that should be in like each part of math. So if you're doing geometry, like part of this should be in there somewhere. So these different practices, if you're doing algebra and so on and so forth. I highlighted 2 of these because I think this is where the screen sharing can really elevate it. So construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, as well as model with mathematics. So in this next slide here, I have just an example of a couple of students that I was working with this. So using DisplayNote, to then they were sharing all of their Chromebooks and then explaining their strategy to the rest of the class of how they got their answer. And then also being able to look at others' work as well, and having their voice run the learning, right? And the teacher's just a facilitator by getting it up on the screen and then saying, all right, go up there and tell the class how you got there. And then pushing students to then compare as well and say, okay, I see that. What do you see different with another student? So that's just one example of the process of a lesson that you can kind of get there with the screen sharing. So the next area we'll look at is how to implement screen sharing technology in the classroom. And I just pointed out 3 different parts that I'm going to go through today. The first one is specifically around DisplayNote because all of our district got new lines. That's kind of how I got in with learning more about DisplayNote. The whole district got new line boards, and DisplayNote was already installed on all of our boards. And so some of the settings I think can definitely help with a lot of the abilities that the screen sharing can do in the classroom. So I'm just going to quickly touch on that. Talk about model and practice with students, just like a lot of different things in the classroom, like super important. And then setting expectations and establishing a routine. So with the settings, I just put a quick slide in here about what to do. So putting it on moderator mode, the DisplayNote, like that was a game changer. Whenever I help teachers set up their boards, a lot of times I'm always like, okay, let's make sure it's on moderator mode because 2 reasons. One, it enables more instructor control. So you're able to like invite certain students and control who's coming in and out. And then the grid view function. To get that grid view function, you have to have this moderator mode on. And I think that the grid view is super powerful in the classroom. So just a couple of steps there. There's 3 steps on the screen to get there. If you haven't done that before or not familiar with it, then super helpful. And here's kind of an example of what I was talking about. So here's the grid view, and you can see that in the bottom right corner, like I still have to invite that next student that wants to share their screen rather than just being able to put their screen up on the board. The next step was model and practice that I have up here. So I just put, so T for teacher, teachers showing this on the screen. And I tell my teachers to like take these screenshots. I have a slide deck I share with them. Take these, show them to your students so they know what to expect and practice doing it before you're putting the instruction with the screen sharing. Because that way the cognitive load is not on like, wait, I click this here and I put in what code, and like you have half the class paying attention and half the class talking to each other trying to figure out what to do. I think it's super important to at least just take the time in the beginning to model the students, take a time to practice it with them. So here with the S aside for students on their Chromebooks, these are just a couple of screenshots that I share, and I talk with teachers through it, but encourage them as well to talk through it with their students prior to then beginning the actual screen sharing. So yeah, model and practice.
If I could just ask a question, it's Ed here. In terms of the practice session, do you bring all of the students in and practice it with you, the teacher, and the students, or is it are you saying to the teacher, you take time to practice?
So I'm saying for the teacher to practice the students in the situation. And in my specific role, I usually am showing the teacher and encouraging them to show the students. But I think, Sue, whatever works best for the teacher in the classroom. I'm not sure if I'm answering this directly, but the teacher, if they want to do it like in small groups, depending on what, so I taught I work with elementary school. So a lot of times I'm working with like first graders or kindergarten or something. And sometimes it's better to do in small group. And sometimes it's easier to do with whole class if the classroom's 1-to-1 and walking through it. So you're one and done. But yeah, did I answer your question, Ed?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, whatever the teacher sees fit, I think is definitely best. And that's always what I tell my teachers, like, this is what I suggest, but you know your kids best, you know your classroom best. So where you see it fit, I do still really encourage to at least just do a quick run through. If you have, if you're teaching secondary, you might not have to go more as explicit through it, but I do think it is super important, at least provide some screenshots just so they know what to expect and know the steps to go to. The third section is setting expectations and routines. Again, this is that part where we're just trying to have the routines in place so that the student's cognitive load is on on the content you're teaching, not as much on just the technology they're trying to work with. And I say that with like any technology, honestly, that I introduce into classrooms with teachers. The first part though I have here is co-create expectations. I'm a big believer in amplifying student voice and having them have a say in the classroom. And I do believe having them to co-create expectations, whether it's classroom expectations or with specific softwares or different devices they're using to co-create expectations. So they're one of the ones coming up with the ideas of, hey, like, what do you think is appropriate for screen sharing? Okay, so like they have a voice in it. And then like, as if things occur, you can always be like, remember we had that discussion, like you came up with that idea, or like we all agreed on this idea. You remember that? So they have a voice in it. And that, so they kind of hold each other to as well to that expectation. And again, creating the classroom more so that it is not the teacher's classroom, but the whole class. So the students are part of that classroom and own the classroom as well. For a routine for screen sharing, I just threw in, and I'm going to ask you guys here a question in a second, but I just threw in a couple ideas I had, and I'd love to hear. So maybe be thinking about what works in your school or ideas that you guys had, or even if some of these you've used or haven't. So I say with a routine, so have something in place in the classroom to get to the screen sharing. So with DisplayNote, it's going to be the join. So DisplayNote.com/join. That needs to be somewhere. So students, when I'm saying, okay, so-and-so share your screen, they are going right in and know where to go, click it and share the screen. So I'm not having to less work on me as a teacher to then like send something out every time, as well as like not having to remind them and be like, oh yeah, remember you need to go here and then you need to go here. So again, simplifying that process. A couple ideas was using a landing page. We use Clever as a district, and teachers can customize their Clever page, add links. So I encourage them a lot of times to make it as a homepage for students with DisplayNote on it or whatever screen sharing software they're using. In our district, our technology department puts Clever on the shelf of their Chromebook. So it's like already there. So it's nothing more the students need to do. I've used Symbaloo as well. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but super helpful tool for collecting a lot of links for the classroom. I would have one time the beginning of the year, either I'd have a teacher assistant come in and help pin and bookmark on all the kids' Chromebooks, just the Symbaloo link. And then as a teacher, if you're getting new links as the year's going on, you can add it in there rather than having to push out a new link every time. And so in just having that one thing bookmarked, you can also have your kids, if they know how to bookmark or walk them through it. I had kindergartners that I worked with that I walked them through how to bookmark it. So, I mean, it can be done. So whatever works best with the teacher. But yeah, just having that landing page so that the kids would they open their Chromebooks or whatever device they're using, and they would just click right there and get right to the screen sharing. Also, another option is pushing out with the LMS. So we use Seesaw as a district and Schoology. So I just provided 2 screenshots here of that. That is not my most suggested way, but if it works for a teacher, that's awesome. The reason why I say not most suggested, because you have to push it out rather than being in one place. And then I have some teachers that use class websites. So they have their classroom website and they have that website bookmarked on their kids' devices. And so they'll click there to get to the DisplayNote to join. And the last one is we also use LandSchool. So classroom management software, I know there's a whole bunch of different ones. We use LandSchool, so you could just push it out to students as well. But again, then you're having to go in there and physically push it out rather than it just being somewhere and telling kids to get there. But these are just some ideas of ways to have that routine there, right? So just setting it up, doing the pre-work. So when it gets to screen sharing, when it gets to the instruction, students are ready to go. And again, this is that pre-work before actually getting into the content. So the next Slido I have here, so it should just shift over on your device if you're using a phone, is which routine do you see most useful in your role? So if you're coaching teachers, is there one that you see would be useful if you're a teacher as well? Do you see something that you think could implement in your classroom? Or what other platforms do you see being useful for this routine? So maybe, I know there's so many different platforms, and I know you guys are in this world of teaching and technology and education. So I'd be curious to just hear anything that I didn't mention that may be useful for that to get that routine in place. Yeah, Google Classroom, LMS, cool. Yeah. With Clever, when I was in Classroom, I didn't realize how much you could customize it, and that was a game changer. A lot of my teachers don't understand that because they have the single sign-in stuff with a lot of applications, but then being able to customize other things. Yep, Go Guarding, just like Land School, cool. Yep. To push out the app. Yep, cool. Yeah, there are so many different platforms that can be useful with this, but again, just whatever it is, whatever your district's using, whatever your school's using, that works best for your teachers. Do it, but just have it as that routine that would be easiest at your school. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing too. It is super helpful to kind of see where other people are at as well. I think I just missed one, but okay. So the next section is, so what teaching goals screen sharing best serves? Now, does this mean it's all? No, not at all. But these are just some ideas that I've seen have worked well. So student empowerment, I kind of spoke and touched on that in the beginning. Displaying and explaining different perspectives, huge part, especially with that culturally responsive teaching practices. Model and practice giving feedback and shifting the narrative in the classroom. Again, having that teacher as a facilitator and then the students as the teacher in the classroom. So the first one, I just have a couple examples of what I mean with this. So with the student student empowerment, exemplars are one way to do this. So having students being able to push their work up on the screen, and I have a couple examples here on the board, and using that to the class to model, and even having them go up there and figure out, like, this is great work, why, right? So having them put it up there and having other students come up there and be like, oh, so-and-so did so well with their introduction sentence and added adjectives and whatever the case may be. So really highlighting students and having their work be what the expectation is, not some like teacher made content. Make the students the content experts as well. So bringing in the work that they've done, their personal experiences, and maybe some other research they've done. We do a lot of project-based learning in our district. And so that research, then being able to share it with the class and teach the class, and pushing it up on the screen with screen sharing ability, super powerful, as well as like the experiences I pointed out there. I mean, building classroom community with this is awesome. So if students are sharing different things going on with their family, like we have a lot of students right now with Ramadan and sharing what that means for their family, what that means with fasting and different things, and being able to push that up on the board and share with others is super powerful. And then I put analysts here. So students as analysts, and this kind of goes into that exemplar piece I was talking about a second ago, being able to come up there and say, this person did really well because this, and this, or maybe it's a piece of research you're bringing up, especially like in this digital world of knowing what's valid and what's not, putting it up there and having students analyze it, but also like modeling it as well. So they're going up there and talking about, this isn't really valid because XYZ, and doing it in front of the class. The class sees it as well. And they're also thinking of ideas of, oh yeah, I've noticed that before too. And the last piece I put here is school-wide collaboration. So the cool thing with the session ID is like you could be in your classroom, share your session ID with another class and be able to share that content with that classroom. So then empowering the students too to make a bigger impact rather than just like what is in their classroom, but then out further in their school and even in other schools and however the teacher is designing the lesson. The next piece is displaying and explaining different perspectives. So I kind of said this before a bit, but really pushing students to examine the strategies they're doing. So like in this example, this is the math one. They had a strategy, they put it on the board and they're like, cool, I solved the problem. That's how I got there. But then pushing them further to not only just say, cool, I got the answer, I know how I did it, but then also saying, wait, so-and-so got the answer and it's right as well, just like mine. How did they do it? So pushing the kids to then look at their work and then opening their minds a little bit bigger and saying, oh, okay, there's another way I can do this too. Let me look, at so-and-so, and being able to explain it and having the kids teach each other, looking at the different work and explaining it in front of the class, especially if you're using grid view or something like that to show the whole class of all these different strategies people use to get to the same answer. And I put in here, like the goal here is a lot of like, I didn't think of it that way. And having kids get to that point So they're realizing, okay, there are multiple ways either to a math solution, or there's multiple ways to think of this issue and come in with different perspectives. So super powerful to make it visual for students, and then to actually see different perspectives and then take those in and process it. The next piece is model and provide feedback. So I always tell my teachers, like, take the time to discuss what is feedback. And again, I definitely know in some of the middles and high schools, this is still something that needs to be specific. But a lot in my elementary schools, like the kids don't even know, like, what does feedback mean? And so taking the time to talk through, like, what is feedback? Why is it important? How do I do it so that it actually produces better products, and going through that. So I put in a couple of links on this slide, and I'll share out the slide deck as well. But Austin's Butterfly is a lesson that I found to be super powerful in the classroom as a teacher. I've observed other teachers using it as well in this role. And this link here just provides the lesson. Let's see if I can pull this up here. This link just provides a video of a teacher going through how to teach the lesson. It goes through the drafts, like the different materials you're going to need. But essentially, it talks about, like, what is feedback? And there's this example boy who drew this butterfly, and he was supposed to do a scientific butterfly. And so he did his first draft, and it was just like a stick type figure. And then some of the kids gave him feedback, and it got a little bit better. And then they gave him feedback, and it got a little bit better, until it got to, like, the end product, which is actually the final picture in the video you see there. So super powerful with students of actually, like, understanding what feedback is. And this was like a week-long lesson, because we took each day just kind of talking about doing the first draft, and the kids would practice. So, but super powerful. So I wanted to share that. Additionally, I work a lot with teachers and providing them resources as well in my role. So I coach, I do professional learning, and I create resources for classrooms. And one of them was around feedback. They were using other different platforms to have kids practice giving each other feedback. And so we try to make it, like, super simple, and it goes along with this. And this is a lot of this is kind of out there. Some people may have seen these three before, but pinpointing that feedback needs to be kind, specific, and helpful, and having those three pieces as you're teaching feedback. And I created this poster for this teacher just to put on the wall and, like, reference as they're teaching, like, okay, is your feedback kind? Was it specific? And for primary, like, taking the time to talk through, what does specific mean? And then, is it helpful? Because this actually has some actionable steps that the student can then use. Furthermore, we provided some sentence stems for students to then do that. So, like, if they're like, I don't know how to, give specific feedback. So here's a couple sentence stems as well, just to have posted in the classroom to say, well, choose one of those and see if you can help give them some feedback. And I would force students to give, like, choose at least two to do for your peer. So just a couple of helpful resources, I think, to get there. And let me go back to presenting it. With screen sharing, especially, again, with having multiple things up there, you're able to put that work on there and model this feedback super easily. So if a student does have a writing sample, like in this picture, the student is highlighting a part of the writing and modeling how she's giving feedback. So she's up there highlighting it, and then being able to model to the class is like, hey, right here, this is not a complete sentence because it doesn't have, whatever. So being able to model that and giving reasoning and using those sentence stems, or being really specific and kind and helpful, like outlined in the classroom. So feedback is a big one, I think, with the screen sharing piece, specifically too around the modeling as well. So kids can actually observe others doing it and kind of get a better understanding of what it looks like. So that's another piece there. So I listed 4. Oh, I didn't do the last one. Why is my thing out of order? Hold on one second. Let me get back to one. Went to this one. Here we go. All right. So the last one is shifting the narrative. And I've said this a couple of times already. So the screen sharing is super helpful for then pushing it. Students can be at their seats on their device, 4 students at a time, teaching the class or taking turns, highlighting the work they're doing, explaining different content they discovered. And they can do that from their desk if you wanted to. If that's how you wanted to run your classroom. I really encourage having students come up and do it. But with the screen sharing ability, they don't have to plug in any device to their Newline board, right? Or their whatever board they're using, they can just share from their screen. They don't have to share. I had a teacher I was working with that they were doing their presentations and she was talking about how it was a pain because like the ports and the Chromebooks they had like didn't match up with what they needed. And it was a whole thing. And this was actually a super helpful solution to just have them share their screen from their Chromebooks and go through their presentation that way. And not have to worry about like how to get it there. So she was like sharing it with the teacher and then the teacher was sharing with them. So again, utilizing students as teachers, having them have the voice, having them talk through the content and having the teacher as a facilitator. So providing them with the resources, providing them with the structure and the routines of how to then get the content out there. So now, coming back to this, so which teaching goal do you see most useful in your classroom or in classrooms that you work with? So I went through 4, talked about student empowerment, gave a couple examples there, model and providing feedback, and displaying, explaining different perspectives, and then also shifting the narrative. So looking here again at which one of those you see being most useful, again, with your classroom or classrooms that you work with. Cool. So I definitely think too, like, in my perspective, because I have these on here, like all 4 are super powerful and I think they can all be a piece of it. But also like choosing one that maybe is something that like you see could happen if you're a teacher, like in your classroom right away, like it'd be easy to shift to it. Or one that you see, like if you're working as an admin at your school, that you see a couple of your teachers being able to take on right away, and then getting into others as well. So yeah, I definitely, so displaying, explaining different perspectives for sure. And student empowerment. Cool. Awesome. So short and sweet for you guys today. I wanted to provide some time for questions. I kind of ran through that. But I also have up here my email address. If you guys have any other questions that don't get answered today, or have any questions later on, I'm happy to answer them. So that's my email address down there. So Britney_Horton@dpsk12.net. But yeah, so this time is for any questions you guys may have. I'm happy to answer anything or elaborate anymore if need be.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to just add your questions to the chat or raise your hand, I guess to warm the room up. Britney, how do you know, not every student's the same, not every teacher's the same. Do you have to change any of your methods of delivery facilitation based on, I guess, the teacher's level of comfort with technology? You know, how do you, if a teacher's really comfortable versus not comfortable, how do you change things?
Yeah, that's actually, so that slide I had with the questions on it, that's actually one of the questions I have on guiding my coaching a lot of times is like, what is the teacher's level of comfort? What is the student's level of comfort in the classroom with technology just in general? So yes, to answer your question, 100%. I think it's like with any teaching, like you got to know your audience, know who you're working with, understand their needs, understand where they're coming in. So yeah, I just always chunk it in. And that's again, why I try to start with like, what is your objectives that you're already trying to reach? So I'm not something extra. And what are you working on? So then I can just try to figure out like, where is it best to then plug in from there? And what would be the most achievable and give them voice. I'm a big component of like cognitive coaching and talking them and having them get to where they want to go, because when teachers have more voice in what they are trying to incorporate in their classroom, they're going to do it more likely than me being like, hey, do this, you know? So definitely having them get to the point of like, again, when I'm saying like, where do you see student voice fitting? Cool. Okay. Well, here's a couple of technologies I think can do this. Like, which one do you think may work best in your classroom? And that's kind of how I get there. And I feel like teachers feel more comfortable as well whenever I'm providing them the choices. And then again, they're making the choice of what works for them and their kids.
Superb. Question here from Doris, again, this is a technical question, maybe more for me than you. Do you have any problems with lag time while sharing or with sessions dropping? And I guess so technology is technology. Is that something that you face, and how do you get around that if you do face them?
Yeah, so again, these new lines are boards are new to us this year. So I have some teachers that I have using, like right now, so a lot of my teachers are trying to just use what is the new line board and what is these different functions I can do. And then getting into, some of my teachers are using DisplayNote. But I haven't yet had teachers come to me, at least two, about that issue. But again, like I said, like technology, there's always that thing that could happen with it, and just being able to then quickly shift and trying to see how you can do it a little bit differently for that day. And I think that's just kind of where it is too. So wherever in the classroom, if you're planning on sharing 4 screens and it drops and keeps dropping them, then that day I'd be like, all right, cool, we're not doing this today. You know, if I was in the classroom, this is not working with us, and just let the kids know and handling. That's what I have done in the classroom, because again, technology sometimes likes us and sometimes doesn't.
Okay. And I guess a question for me to Doris. Doris, if you have the software and you are having issues, just feel free to email me at any time, and we'll have a look at what you're saying. So I'll just put my email in the chat. You can reach out to me at any time.
Yeah, I've had to reach out to DisplayNote a couple of times just for various issues with settings. Actually ended up being settings on the new line boards with an update. Anyways, super responsive and super helpful with it, and resolve the issues I had. So hopefully that's the case too with the dropping and the lag issue.
Happily have a look at that. Anyone else on the call got any questions for Britney while she's here, and we can make the best of her? We will send the recording and the slides. So after the session, if you want to review them or share them with any of your colleagues, we can do that. And usually people get I think you've done a great job, Britney. So maybe no questions equals excellent presentation.
Yeah, well, if there are any questions that pop up, even if like you're getting into it and then you're like, what was that you did? Or like, what was that resource? I can't find it. I'm happy. Again, please shoot me an email. I'm happy to support in any way I can.
No worries. Well, I guess the whole point of these webinars, they're more of a place to share ideas and best practice with other users, be the technology coach or a instructional technologist or a teacher. And I found it almost can think of this as in 2 ways, Britney. One, as there's lots of great things you could do and think about for the use of any screen sharing tool as a tool for feedback, to, as a tool to make students the teachers or students as leaders, and obviously I think, which was top of the poll, as a tool for seeing different perspectives. That might be a cultural perspective, or it might be just a different way of looking at the same thing. And certainly, if anything, life has taught me anything, the more people looking at it from different backgrounds and different viewpoints, usually the better it is. You get closer to that butterfly than the stick version of the butterfly. So I thought that was really useful. I hope everyone did as well. But also then, to get to that point of it being used for these ways does require a bit of work around expectation setting, practicing some of those questions that you talked about with your teachers before they even get starting that, and also thinking about how this fits into the whole routine. Again, the landscape is littered with the carcasses of technology tools that have been forced upon users, and that's not in school, just in anywhere. And I think if there's buy-in and expectation setting, and we're doing this together, then your chances of getting to good feedback, student-led learning and different perspectives, they're all really, really important. So I thought that was really great for all of those reasons, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with the rest of our kind of DisplayNote community. So thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me here.
And I guess if there are no further questions, we will call that a wrap. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Brittany. And we'll send you the recording and the link to the presentation as promised.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys for letting me take up part of your day today. I appreciate it. And thank you for participating too. Super helpful to hear different ideas as well.
Thanks, Brittany. And thank you for everyone that listened. Cheers. Bye, guys.